I have a Thanksgiving book to read today, and it's one that's a family favorite, especially to someone that's visiting your home right now, one of your aunties. It's called Thanksgiving at the Tappletons, and that's a picture of the whole family. You're going to meet them in a minute, so then you'll know who all those smiling faces are. Okay? All right, this is kind of a funny book, but it has a nice message. Okay, Thanksgiving at the Tappletons was always a big day. Thanksgiving at the Tappletons meant, of course, the Tappleton family. There was Mr. Tappleton and Mrs. Tappleton and their children, Jenny and Kenny Tappleton. So let's see a picture of them. This book is updated from the first book we had. It's got some different family pictures. But anyway, there's Mr. Tappleton and Mrs. and Jenny and Kenny, if you can see that. Okay, let me introduce you to the other ones. And then there's Grandmother and Grandfather Tappleton. They're right below them here in this picture, right there, where my thumb is. And then there's Aunt Hedda and Uncle Fritz. They're in this picture right over here. Uncle Fritz and Hedda. Okay, there they are eating turkey. These are pictures from other Thanksgivings that they've enjoyed together. And most certainly, of course, there was always the turkey and the trimmings, like you just saw them eating. And they have a picture of it on this page. This is another Thanksgiving dinner where they had a turkey, some dishes, some delicious salad and mashed potatoes and pies, candle burning, a nice table setting, like a traditional Thanksgiving dinner that a lot of families like to enjoy together. All right, so now that you've met everyone, let's get the story going. It was still dark when Mrs. Tappleton lit the oven and took the big turkey out of the refrigerator. She was getting it ready to put in a big dish and put it in the oven. But just then, someone knocked at the kitchen door. It was only about 6 in the morning, so she went to look. And it was Mike the milkman. They had a man that came once a week and dropped off milk. And he said, "Good morning, Mrs. Tappleton. I thought you might like some eggnog today." Because it was the holiday season, he thought she might like a carton of eggnog besides her milk. And Mrs. Tappleton reached for the eggnog. But just as she did, she was holding this big, large turkey under her arm. And just as she reached for the eggnog, whoosh, the turkey slipped out. Now, on a warmer day, this might not have been a big deal. But it was very cold out. And the step was covered with ice. And what is ice? Is it kind of slippery? Yeah. Before she or Mike the milkman could even think, the turkey had slipped down the sidewalk and down into the yard. "Get it!" shouted Mrs. Tappleton. And here she is standing at the door. "Get it!" And Mike reached out. But the turkey was slippery, was sliding so fast on the icy sidewalk that it slid past him, through the gate, and into the street. "Hurry!" screamed Mrs. Tappleton. "Stop that turkey!" And there he is. Poor Mike's trying his hardest. He's running so fast his hat flew off. But who's got ahead of him there? The turkey. This turkey is all ready to be cooked, so he's not a live turkey. And the turkey kept going on the ice. The milkman chased the turkey. Mrs. Tappleton chased the milkman. But guess what? The turkey slid down the hill into the pond. There she is. Her curlers are falling out of her hair. See, it's still dark out. It's so early in the morning. And there's Mike running, and there goes to the pond. Plop, splash. Do you think, what do you think happened after that? After it landed in the pond? It bubbled out of sight. It went down into the pond. You can't eat a turkey when it's in the pond, can you? Well, that's what happened to the turkey. Now let's go on to the next stage. The next episode, I should say, in this family's Thanksgiving Day. When Mr. Tappleton came down to breakfast, he took a long sniff. said, I usually come down and take a big sniff and I smell turkey roasting in the oven. And she said, well, of course you don't smell turkey, she replied. You have a cold. And he said, I don't have a cold, he insisted. Mrs. Tappleton took a pepper shaker and shook it in the air. Here, I'll show you a picture. Here's Mr. Tappleton sniffing and hoping to smell a whiff of the turkey in the oven. There's no turkey in the oven, is there? So his wife makes up this thing and says, you have a cold, don't you know it? And she takes a pepper shaker behind him and just shakes it. And pepper makes people do this. Achoo! And that's exactly what he did. Her husband sneezed when she shook that pepper, and she said, see? I told you you have a cold. So, he didn't know what was going on. And after breakfast, Mr. Tappleton put on his coat and his scarf and hat and gloves, because remember, it was pretty cold out. And he said, I'm going to the bakery to buy our pies. Mrs. Tappleton handed him his boots. Wear these, she said. I know for a fact that it is quite slippery out today. Well, Sim's Bakery was so crowded, the line reached out onto the sidewalk. Nowadays, with social distancing, our lines are pretty long because people have to stay about 6 feet apart from each other with our masks on, right? But this was not during a pandemic, and the line was very long. Here's that, whoops, let's this side first. There's the bakery, it says Sim's Bakery, and there's the door and windows, and here's people in line out on the sidewalk. So he went across the street to this is called a diner, or like a little restaurant, and had a cup of coffee. And I'll just sit here in the window, and I'll watch, and when the line gets shorter, I'll go over and get my pies. So he did, because he hated to wait in long lines. Well, by the time he got back to the bakery, the long line was gone, but so were the pies. No pumpkin pie, no mince pie, no rhubarb pie, no apple or cherry or nothing. Mr. Tappleton was afraid to go home with nothing. He had waited too long. Well, he thought quick and he said, how about 2 boxes tied up with string, please? And Mrs. Sims, who owned the bakery, looked at him. You mean 2 empty boxes? That's right, he said. And so that's what the ladies at the bakery did for him when he saw the pies were gone. And here he comes home with the pies and hands them to his wife. Do you think she's going to notice something when she gets 2 empty boxes, even not opening them? Are they going to feel different if there's nothing in the box? Well, she says, my, they feel so light, remarked Mrs. Tappleton. Well, certainly they are light, retorted Mr. Tappleton. Mrs. Sims prides herself on how light her pies are. So he wanted her to think that there were pies in there, but they were just really not heavy at all, very light. Well, Mrs. Sims set the table, and she called to her son, Kenny, you may make the salad. There's lettuce in the crisper, and carrots and radishes too. Kenny's face grew pale. Just yesterday, he had emptied the crisper. That's the drawer in the refrigerator where you can keep some vegetables. He had emptied the crisper and fed all the vegetables. And I just brought a couple carrots because you know that was one of the vegetables. He had fed all the carrots and the lettuce and radishes to the bunnies in Mr. Butterworth's class. That's his teacher. So he had brought all that food to the school, and he thought, how can I tell my mother? Oh, he just couldn't. So he took out an empty salad bowl, and he covered it with foil, and he stuck it back in the fridge. So here he is thinking about all those bunnies eating that yummy lettuce and carrots and radishes and thinking, And instead of saying anything, he just gets a big bowl and covers it with foil and sticks it back in the fridge. They won't know. That's what he thinks. Okay, now on to the next page. When the others went to pick up the relatives at the train station, Jenny, their daughter, stayed behind to mash the potatoes. every year this was her job and she loved it. And she said, this year, I think I'll make them even better. I'll use the blender. Now, when you make potatoes, and I don't have mashed potatoes here, but usually you have a pan and you cook the potatoes, and after you've washed and cleaned them and cut them up and everything, you cook them in a saucepan, and then when they're soft and ready to go, you put some milk and sugar and salt and pepper. You put some milk and butter. You can put sugar in if you want, but it'll be a little weird. And salt and pepper. And then you mash. This is called a potato masher. And this is the old-fashioned way. You just kind of mash until they're nice and soft and creamy and just the way you like them. But she thought, I'm going to use the blender. And some people do that, or they use an electric mixer. I brought a part of the blender up, the part that you would use to put your food in. And so she cooked the potatoes in the pan. She scooped them out with a spoon. I don't have a spoon here, but you can imagine, and put them in here with her milk and butter and salt and pepper. And then she put it over on the stand that you put it on and plug in the blender to turn it on. And then when you set it on a certain setting, there's blades in here that chops it all up and makes it nice and smooth. And hopefully it's even creamier and less lumpy than when you do it by hand. And she thought, this is going to be extra special this year. So here she is doing what I was just telling you. Here's the big pot. She cooked the potatoes. There's her butter, milk, salt, and pepper. Here's the blender plugged in. She's all ready. She's putting everything, spooning everything into the blender to get it all ready so she can turn it on and blend it. Well, just as Jenny flicked on the switch, the phone rang. It was her best friend, Nora. If there was one thing Jenny loved to do better than mashed potatoes, it was talk. So Jenny talked and talked and talked to Nora, her friend. And she might still be talking today had not a wet glump of something hit her on the back of the head. What do you think happened? Here she is, talking on the phone, happily paying no attention to the blender over here. Thought, oh, it's blending away and I'll check on it in a minute. But something is missing. Can you see what's missing from the blender? I showed you how you put everything in it. But then you have to add the lid. If the lid's not on, whatever you're blending in here or mixing is going to go, it's going to be twirled around and up out of the blender. Whoosh! And in Jenny's case, without that lid on, they were mashed potatoes. Now, I love mashed potatoes, but I don't really like them on my head. I don't think you would either. And she was like sitting there talking, and she felt this big clump on her head and said, what is going on? She turned around to see, and just then another glob smack hit her in the face, hand into her hair, and she's like, oh my goodness, I forgot the lid. Oh, splat, and another one hit her in the face. The blender was going wild, and mashed potatoes were flying everywhere. Do you think we're going to have mashed potatoes for dinner that day? Things aren't looking very good for that family's dinner. The turkey's missing, the pies are missing, the salad's missing, and now the potatoes are missing. Well, without even saying goodbye to Nora, Jenny quickly hung up the phone, scrubbed her face, and wiped the mashed potatoes from the kitchen. And it was covered. She had to wipe nearly everything in the kitchen because it was covered with mashed potatoes everywhere. Floor, ceiling, cabinets, table, everything. And she was just finishing as the others came back from the train station where they had picked up Grandma and Grandpa and their Aunt Hedda and Uncle Fritz. Well, Uncle Fritz had kind of a big tummy, and he patted it and said, I'm hungry, he said. And Grandfather Tappleton laughed and said, I'm as hungry as an elephant. There they are. There's Grandpa, Aunt Hedda, Uncle Fritz. Grandma's probably behind the crowd. And here they are sitting at the table, Grandma and Grandpa. And they're thinking about, the table is set, and they're thinking, we're going to eat soon. And everyone sat down. Well, it was a Tappleton tradition, their family tradition, that grandmother would say the Thanksgiving prayer. So that's why she's sitting there with her hands together thinking about the prayer. But she says, I'll pray as soon as the turkey is ready. She smiled. And Grandpa Tappleton was thinking about all that yummy Thanksgiving dinner food that was coming, and he said, "I'm as hungry as 2 elephants," said Grandpa. He was really hungry. Mr. Tappleton went to the oven, and he said, "I'll carve the turkey now." And he opened the oven door. What happened when he opened the oven door? Did he take a turkey out? No. This says, "The turkey is gone." Oh, how could the turkey be gone? How can I carve a turkey if there's no turkey? So then he got to thinking, maybe she put it somewhere else. Maybe Mrs. Tappleton put it somewhere else. So he searched on the table and under the table and in every kitchen cabinet. He looked into the sink and in the broom closet. He looked in some funny places. I don't think I would put my baked turkey, if I had one, in a closet with a broom. But anyway, he did. He looked everywhere, and he couldn't find the turkey anywhere. Because, of course, where was it? Right. Well, Mrs. Tappleton, she had to tell the truth, didn't she? So she took a deep breath. Well, she told them how their fine turkey had slipped out the door and down the steps and crossed the yard and through the gate and down the street and plop, smash, splash into the pond. "Oh, so much for the turkey," said Uncle Fritz, and his stomach started rumbling a little louder. Rumble, grumble, rumble. "Never mind," said Aunt Hedda good-naturedly. "We'll fill up on all the trimmings." That means all the other food that comes with the turkey. So Jenny said, "I'll go get the salad, and then Grandmother can say the prayer." So Jenny set the bowl on the table and peeled off the aluminum foil. And what happened? Oh, there's nothing in the bowl. And everybody's looking with that surprised look. And Kenny's like, uh-oh, I got to say something about this, right? "I fed the rabbits at school," confessed Kenny. Uncle Fritz looked downright gloomy. "So much for the salad." His stomach rumbled again. Rumble, rumble, rumble. "I'm as hungry as 3 elephants," sighed Grandfather. Well, Kenny jumped up. "Well, we can at least have Jenny's mashed potatoes." And he brought the pot from the kitchen, and he lifted the lid, and what did he find? Oops, oops. Nothing in there. And Jenny right away said, "I was on the phone," said Jenny meekly, "and the blender went wild." "So much for the potatoes." And Uncle Fritz's stomach rumbled even more. Rumble, 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 rumble. Getting pretty loud. "And I'm as hungry as 4 elephants," Grandfather declared. Oh dear. "The pies!" cried Mrs. Tappleton. "I'll go get the pies." "I'll say grace as soon as the pies are cut," Grandmother said with a smile. So Mrs. Tappleton got the boxes, brought them onto the table, and set them down, untied the string, and eek. Nothing, right? "You brought home 2 empty boxes?" Okay. Excuse me. I had a little interruption there. "You brought home 2 empty boxes?" She glared at Mr. Tappleton, who covered his ears. 5 elephants, groaned Grandfather. He's so hungry he could eat 5 elephants, he thinks. The dining room got very quiet. Everyone looked down at the empty table. Uncle Fritz muttered something, but it could not be heard because his stomach was rumbling so loud. A tear rolled down Jenny's cheek. "No Thanksgiving dinner," she sniffled. "Nothing to say a prayer for," sighed Kenny. Here's the picture. Everybody's looking kind of sad. And look at their plates are empty. Looks like they have a little drink in their cup. That's nice. They're like, "Oh dear, what are we going to do?" Grandmother smiled. "Of course there is something. There is more to Thanksgiving than a turkey and trimmings. And then Grandmother Tappleton asked everyone to bow their heads and to hold hands around the dining room table. So they all grabbed the hand next to them, and this is the prayer she said. You just see the prayer of them all sitting at the table, looking pleasant. And here's Grandma with Grandpa, and she sang a nice prayer. And listen to this prayer. It's really very sweet. And here's her prayer. Turkeys come and turkeys go, and trimmings can be lost, we know, but we're together, and that's what matters, not what's served upon the platters. Amen. And a platter is a large dish. So when we're saying it doesn't matter, it's what is not what's served upon the platters. The food doesn't matter. It's the fact that we're together, right? And Aunt Hedda says, that was a wonderful prayer. Mrs. Tappleton jumped up. I remembered, we have liverwurst and cheese in the refrigerator. I'll help fix the sandwiches, offered Mr. Tappleton. Jenny wiped her tear away and said, I'll get the pickles. And Kenny laughed. I'll open a jar of applesauce for dessert. And so they ran in the kitchen and got everything ready. And the Tappletons had their Thanksgiving dinner after all. Uncle Fritz's stomach stopped rumbling. And Grandfather Tappleton ate enough liverwurst to feed 6 elephants. In fact, everyone had plenty to eat, but most of all, they had each other. Isn't that a nice story? It's kind of funny, and it has some lessons in it, which I bet you can try to think about. When the turkey went missing, when the pies weren't available and all sold out, when the salad wasn't there because Kenny had given it away, and that wasn't a bad thing. None of them did anything naughty or bad. And when the mashed potatoes got blown out of the blender because she forgot the lid. Nobody did anything bad. Nobody did anything on purpose. They were all honest mistakes, right? But what could they have done differently? Do you think that when something happened, they could have shared with everybody what happened? Instead of waiting until Thanksgiving dinner and then revealing to everybody, oops, no turkey, no pies, no salad, no potatoes. Yeah, this is a story about honesty too. But you know what else it is? It's a story about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving, or giving thanks, is something we do on Thanksgiving. We look for what we're thankful for, and we say, thank you, God, for that thing, those things. And Grandma's prayer said that the food isn't the main thing. The food is yummy, and we can certainly thank God for the food, whether it's turkey and mashed potatoes and veggies and whatever, dessert, or whether it's sandwiches and pickles and so forth. Whatever the food is, we can be thankful, right? But the most important thing, Grandma said, is, but we're together. That's what matters, not what's served upon the platters. Amen. And it's true. Whether it's a whole table full of Tappletons, if you have a lot of family members with you, or if you just have your mom and dad and yourself, or if you have friends over, or neighbors, or whoever, a new friend, a visitor, whatever you have, the people with you are who matters. And you can be thankful for that along with your other blessings. The fact that you can get together, the fact that you're healthy, the fact that you have food to eat, and on and on. But the love for each other is pretty special. So think about that this Thanksgiving, and remember, Thanksgiving at the Tappletons, which I forgot to mention is by Eileen Spinelli. See you later.